And you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Yashan De Silva. On this week's episode, it's about Charles Lloyd, his biography, and best hits. During this hour, we're going to be talking about more of his best albums of all time. Here's a quick recap of what's coming up. So we're going to be talking about the ECM era of Charles Lloyd, where the music slows down, stretches out, and takes on a reflective, almost spiritual vibe. We'll cover four standout albums: Fish Out of Water, Canto, The Water is Wide, and Mirror. From the ethereal surging sounds of Fish Out of Water to the global textures and meditative journeys of Canto, Lloyd's playing is as thoughtful as it's lyrical. Then we'll explore The Water is Wide, a warm, intimate collection blending standards and originals, and finish with Mirror, showcasing Lloyd's new quartet in full late career brilliance. So these albums show a master at work, reflective, expressive, and still exploring new landscapes after decades of performing. On this week's episode, it's about Charles Lloyd, his biography, and best hits. During this hour, we're going to be talking about more of his best albums of all time. His ECM era, spanning roughly the late 1980s through the 2000s. After a long hiatus from the public eye, Lloyd returned not with a bang, but with a deeply reflective, expansive voice that seemed to come from years of listening, wondering, and absorbing the world. So we're going to be talking about four albums that define this era: Fish Out of the Water, Canto, The Water is Wide, and Mirror. These recordings showcase a mature Lloyd, still adventurous, still searching, but now with a profound spirituality and global sensibility. Let's start off with Fish Out of Water, released in 1989. This was Lloyd's first ECM album. Bobo Stenson on piano, Paul Danielson on bass, and John Christiansen on drums. The result is an album that's spacious, contemplative, and profoundly serene. Listening to Fish Out of the Water, you notice right away how Lloyd's tenor saxophone seems to float effortlessly above the ensemble, intertwining with the piano and rhythm section like wind over water. There are subtle blues inflections, but the overall mood is almost hymn-like, reflective and inward-looking. The album hints at the spiritual dimension that would come to define much of Lloyd's ECM work. Even the flute passages, like on Tellaro, feel luminous and searching. Next, in 1997, Lloyd released Canto. If Fish Out of the Water introduced his introspective ECM voice, Canto deepened it. This album finds Lloyd exploring world music textures alongside a chord of extraordinary musicians: Stenson again on piano, Anders Jormin on bass, and Billy Hart on drums. The pieces on Canto are long meditative journeys, calm, serene, and deeply expressive. You can hear traces of folk melodies, Asian influences, even hints of ancient music rituals. Lloyd's saxophone and flute feel like a voice guiding the listener through a quiet yet vibrant landscape. Then comes The Water is Wide, released in 2000. Here, Lloyd works with pianist Brad Meldo, bassist Larry Grenadier, and on soundtracks, guitarist John Abercrombie, combining two ensembles to create an album that's warm, lyrical, and reflective. The title track, a beautiful traditional melody, sets the tone, but Lloyd also revisits original compositions and jazz standards, reinterpreted with subtlety and grace. Highlights like his take on Hoagy Carmichael's Georgia and Duke Ellington's Heaven reveal Lloyd's ability to convey deep emotion without excess. What's striking across The Water is Wide is the way Lloyd balances intimacy and expansiveness. His sound is gentle, unassuming, always expressive. Finally, we arrive at Mirror, released in 2010, featuring the new quartet: pianist Jason Moran, bassist Ruben Rogers, drummer Eric Harland. This album blends standards, folk tunes, and originals, creating a tapestry of textures and moods. Mirror showcases Lloyd as a moving ballad player, with the sound described as gauzy, vulnerable, and utterly engaging. Tracks like Desolation, Sound, and I Fall in Love Too Easily float effortlessly, while interpretations of gospel songs like Go Down Moses or Mexican folk pieces like La Llorona demonstrate the quartet's versatility. Moran's inventive piano, Rogers' warm bass, Harlan's dynamic drumming provide a perfect foil for Lloyd's introspective tenor and flute lines. Across these four ECM albums, a pattern emerges. It's worth noting how different these recordings feel from high-energy 1960s quartet. Back then, Lloyd was bridging jazz with a counterculture, playing festivals, engaging crowds, pushing outward. In the ECM era, he's inward, contemplative, deliberating. Yet the sense of exploration remains. He's still seeking, still discovering, but the search has deepened. So if you're new to this period, start with Fish Out of Water. Feel the serenity. Move to Canto for the world music textures and meditative depth. Then The Water is Wide shows warmth, intimacy, and lyrical grace. Finish with Mirror, a late career triumph that blends standards, originals, and folk influences into a seamless, reflective whole. Silver. On this week's episode, it's about Charles Lloyd, his biography, and best hits. Now it's time for some trendy music news. Acclaimed saxophonist Tim Garland is offering a stunning preview of his upcoming duo album Mezzo, sharing a new interpretation of Eric Satie's Nassim No. 1, just ahead of the winter solstice. The full album arrives on February 27th and pairs Garland with Grammy-winning pianist Jeffrey Keeson, celebrating a 25-year musical partnership captured in one intimate New York recording session. Jazz legend Joe Lovano calls their interplay magical. What makes this project truly unique, Tim Garland is stepping away from the tenor sax for the first major release of his career, spotlighting the mezzo-soprano saxophone, one of the rarest instruments in the world, with only about 20 in existence. Its warm, haunting voice sits between soprano and alto, giving this music a beautifully reflective tone. The album blends new original compositions with works by Satie, Chick Corea, Margaret Miller, and a single-take rendition of Cole Porter's Every Time We Say Goodbye. There's even the first ever recording of La Fiesta on mezzo-soprano sax, so this is music for slowing down, leaning in, and listening deeply. And that was some trendy music news on the Weekend Jazz Update with Yashan De Silva. We're going for a short break, we'll be right back after that. When we come back, we're going to be talking about some of Charles Lloyd's best albums of all time. Stay tuned. and you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan Silva. On this week's episode, it's about Charles Lloyd, his biography, and best hits. During this summer, we're going to be talking about more of his best albums of all time. Here's a quick recap of what's coming up. So we're going to be diving into Charles Lloyd's Blue Note era, his work with the Marvels, Wild Man Dance, a cinematic festival suite that stretches jazz into folk and world music textures. I Long to See You, warm and lyrical with Bill Frisell and Greg Lees's guitars adding country folk colors. Passing Through, a live celebration of the new quartet's energy and improvisational brilliance. And Vanished Gardens, a transcendent collaboration with Lucinda Williams that fuses jazz, blues, and Americana storytelling. So this is music that's adventurous, heartfelt, and full of life. On this week's episode, it's about Charles Lloyd, his biography, and best hits. During this summer, we're going to be talking about more of his best albums of all time. His Blue Note years featuring the innovative ensemble known as the Marvels. Even in his later years, Lloyd continued to stretch, explore, and invite us into new musical worlds. So we're going to be talking about 4 albums that exemplify that period. Let's begin with Wild Man Dance, released in 2015. This album is an album-length suite commissioned for a festival featuring Lloyd's Marvels alongside a small world music ensemble. The effect is cinematic and expansive. The suite blends jazz improvisation with Eastern European and Middle Eastern influences. You feel the interplay between jazz quintet and folk instruments, the give and take that makes it more than a composition but a living dialogue. It's a reminder that Lloyd, even decades into his career, refuses to stay in one place. Next is I Long to See You, released in 2016. On this album, Lloyd fully embraces Americana, forming the Marvels with guitarist Bill Frisell and pedal steel guitarist Greg Lees, alongside Reuben Rogers on bass and Eric Harland on drums. This album is very warm, lyrical, and deeply intimate. Lloyd's originals intermingle with reimagined standards, including a breathtaking take on the Beach Boys' God Only Knows, and a song by singer-songwriter Sean Rao. Frisell's gentle picking and Lees's side guitar complement Lloyd's tenor and flute perfectly, creating a palette that's both spacious and deeply emotive. The album embodies Lloyd's own aspiration. I want to stretch my wings wider. Here, he does so by blending jazz improvisation with American roots music, producing a sound that's hushed, affectionate, and utterly unique. Then comes Passing Through, released in 2017, a live album celebrating the 10th anniversary of Lloyd's new quartet. Recorded in Los Angeles, this album captures the energy, joy, and intensity of a band in peak form. The performances range from jubilant swing to fiery free jazz passages, with Lloyd leading the front, full of life and focus. Highlights include extended takes on familiar themes. The music is joyous and adventurous, a perfect reminder that Lloyd's spirit is as vital as ever. Critics noted that he sounds as if he's just getting started. There's a sense of conversation here between the musicians and the audience that's exhilarating and deeply satisfying. Finally, we explore Vanished Gardens, released in 2018, a collaboration between Charles Lloyd and his Marvels and singer-songwriter Lucinda Williams. This album is a hybrid, a meeting of jazz, Americana, blues, and country rock. It emerged from a tour that the two acts shared and captures the warmth and intimacy of that experience. Williams contributes vocals and co-writes songs, while Lloyd provides instrumental counterpoint on saxophone and flute. Tracks like Dusk blend bluesy storytelling with Lloyd's expressive melodies. Blues for Langston and La Rue highlight the tender lyrical side of Lloyd's flute. And the epic title track. It's a late career high point, an album that demonstrates Lloyd's ability to bridge genres while maintaining emotional depth. What ties all these Blue Note Marvels recordings together is Lloyd's continuing curiosity. Even into his 80s, he's still exploring, collaborating, and challenging himself. He mixes traditions, genres, and instruments while remaining unmistakably himself. There's warmth, wisdom, and joy in every note. So listening to these 4 albums, you can hear a musician who has fully lived musically and personally. From the spiritual introspection of ECM to the adventurous early days of the 1960s, to the hybrid, genre-defined explorations of the Marvels, Lloyd's career is a testament to growth, curiosity, and beauty. If you want to start anywhere in this period, Wild Man Dance gives you the cinematic scope. I Long to See You, the intimate American vomit, Passing Through, the live energy and exuberance, and Vanished Gardens, the genre-spanning collaboration. Together, they reveal an artist who continues to surprise, inspire, and speak directly. So Charles Lloyd was born in 1938 in Tennessee, a city soaked in blues, gospel, and early rock and roll. That sound, Beale Street, the Mississippi Delta, never left him. He studied classical music and jazz, then headed west in the early 1960s, working with artists like Cannonball Adderley and Chico Hamilton. His real breakthrough came in the mid-decade when he formed his own quartet and introduced the world to 2 musicians who would go on to redefine jazz, Keith Jarrett and Jack DeJohnette. By the late 60s, Charles Lloyd was one of jazz's biggest stars, playing festivals, crossing over to rock audiences, and opening doors for a new generation. Then at the height of his fame, he stepped away. In the 1970s, Lloyd turned inward, focusing on spirituality, teaching, and personal exploration. When he eventually returned, the music was deeper, more reflective, and spiritually grounded. Since the 1990s, he's been widely regarded as an elder statesman of jazz, continuing to evolve and release acclaimed work well into his 80s. So with that in mind, let's talk about the 5 albums that best tell that story. We start with Forest Flower live at Monterey from 1966. This is the Charles Lloyd record. Captured live at the Monterey Jazz Festival, it became one of the best-selling jazz albums of the decade and introduced jazz rock audiences. Spiritual, melodic, wide open, and featuring that legendary lineup with Jarrett and DeJohnette. Next up, The Water is Wide, released in 2000. This album marks Lloyd's powerful late career resurgence. It's deeply spiritual and lyrical, blending jazz with folk, gospel, and world music. For many listeners, this is where they rediscovered Charles Lloyd. Then there's Dreamweaver, also from 1966. Think of this This is the studio companion to Forest Flower, but more expansive and experimental. Eastern modes, blues, free jazz. It's an early sign of jazz reaching beyond borders and into what we now think of as world music. And finally, Canto, released in 2014. A modern classic featuring the Marvels with musicians like Bill Frisell. It blends jazz, blues, and Americana into something warm and grounded, showing Charles Lloyd as a storyteller late into his career. From Memphis to Monterey, from spiritual retreat to creative rebirth, Charles Lloyd's career isn't just a timeline, it's a journey. And that was some insight into everything that we discussed on this week's episode of the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. And on that note, we've come to an end of this week's episode of the program. Don't forget, you can check out the archives of today's show on my YouTube channel, The Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan. So I'll see you again next week. Have a great week ahead.